Hello everyone, this is Dave. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, today I'm just going to quickly wrap up what I've been doing with my investments, as well as talk a little bit about the overall markets, and really basically just commiserate with you guys on how the markets have been going the last few months, because it's kind of something like this, I think.
What he means is Old Testament, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor. Real wrath of God type stuff.
Exactly.
Fire and brimstone coming down from the skies. Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes.
The dead rising from the grave.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Yeah, if you're watching this, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you about the trade war and the tariff situation that President Trump has started. Needless to say, or maybe not needless to say, but I am not a big fan of what's been happening. Before we dive into all that, I hope you will consider hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already, because every new subscriber helps out so much with the channel growth. And if you are already a subscriber, thank you so much. You guys rock, and those likes and comments always help out as well. Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive into this month's investing updates. Starting off with the overall markets, obviously it's been rough out there. Crazy stuff caused by this tariff war. Obviously looking at the S&P 500, we've really fallen off a cliff, going from above 6,000 to under 5,000 now, and really just it's the sharpness of the fall more than how far we've fallen that I think has caught really everyone off guard, myself included. Looking at the NASDAQ, of course, just over the last couple days, really wild stuff. As I was saying, today we opened up sharply and then dropped way down, and really just wild swings in the stock market. The sharp move upward does give me a little bit of hope that maybe there is a lot of money out there coiled and ready to pounce on a turnaround when it comes. But I do think we need a little bit more certainty of what's going to happen with this tariff situation and the trade war before we get that big recovery. Now, talking about my portfolio, because I like to be transparent and share with you guys how things are going. On a 1 month basis here, I am down about 10%, which I guess isn't horrible, doesn't feel great, of course, but, you know, could be worse. But wait, it is worse, because if we go out 3 months, well, now you can see the pain really starting to hit as I'm down more than 30% on a 3 month basis. So that definitely does hurt and take a bite out of the account balance. Zooming out even further now on a 1 year basis, we're talking about a still solid return, but it's just the wild swings that have been so crazy that it makes it hard to handle and really tests your nerve and resolve as an investor. So I went from all the way up to 200% return on a 1 year basis, down to now about a 90% return, which, you know, is still a great return over 1 year, but having that 200% and dropping all the way back down, really a wild ride, driven in large part, of course, to my Rocket Lab shares going up to about 30 and then back down into the teens, as well as Tesla. Similar story there, my two largest single company holdings, and to a lesser extent some other ones, as well as the index funds behaving similarly with the overall markets as well. Really a wild ride. I do think I'm pretty lucky that I had to pull together a down payment to buy a new house at just the right time. So I did make some sales nearer to the highs, which is nice. Kind of a forcing function there, forcing me to sell at a good time with that house, but we'll go over some of that a little bit later on. 4 year basis, further out, similar story is really, you can see that 1 year, just how wild it was. But back in 2022, we had an absolutely horrible run. At one point, I was down more than 50%. Things were bleak. So overall, obviously, I'm a lot happier than I was back in 2023, because that was a rough time. I'm sure you guys are aware Rocket Lab was probably down in the 4s at that point, maybe 5s if you've been around long enough like I have. But overall, still okay with the performance. Since then, it's just been so choppy, and Luckily, it's not something I stress out about too much. I do think, I don't know if it's just that I've been investing for so long now that I've gotten used to it, or I do have a stronger nerve, or like it doesn't stress me out, the right mindset for it. Maybe that helps. But yeah, definitely been a bumpy ride, and certainly something you need to be prepared for if you're an investor in growth or tech or space stocks specifically. So, as I mentioned, with the sales for the house, sorry the quality of these two images is so bad. This is screenshots from the web interface of my trading brokerage on two separate accounts. I did make sales of, this is in Canadian dollars, so it's not as impressive as it looks on the to the Americans out there, but $91,000 followed by $43,000 in a different account. So taking gains there of 130 maybe-ish $1,000, a little more, to go towards that house down payment, and the timing really worked out well for me. Now at least I can tell that with the benefit of hindsight. I do hope you guys were able to take some gains at the highs as well. I do have to say, a few months back, I was starting to feel a little bit uneasy with just how fast things had run. So, pullbacks can be healthy to a certain degree, although the cause of this pullback, personally, I don't think is healthy. Continuing on to what I did over the past month, did some portfolio rebalancing. So I sold some index funds on the Canadian side, kind of decided I prefer the US stock markets to the Canadian stock markets in large part, to be honest. I think there's a lot more interesting tech, interesting companies going on there. So I sold, I believe this was a bank ETF as well as another Canadian ETF, put them into the QQQ, which is the NASDAQ. Now, obviously, it would have been better off to have just held that in cash. Now I know that. But generally, I just like to leave money in the market because rather than timing all the highs and the lows, I just ride it out, and generally in the long run things go up. So with index funds, I just stay invested, and usually I do well over the long run. So that was the index funds rebalancing. I also made my first buy of AST Space Mobile here. Very small buy, got a price of about $20.9 per share, only 45 shares because I am now cash poor. All that money going towards the house, unfortunately, only came to about $940 American, but it is something, and I am now in the game, as it were, with AST Space Mobile. It's a company I've had a complicated relationship with for a long time now. On the one hand, I do think the potential market size and total addressable market of what they're going for is absolutely massive, and I believe in the demand. On the other hand, they have no revenue, and I generally don't like investing in companies that have no revenue. But on the third hand, I am a space investor and do like to follow the space companies out there that are publicly traded and invest in the good ones. And there's enough people out there, smart people, invested in this one that they convinced me to dip a toe into it. It's never going to take over Rocket Lab for my top space company position. Rocket Lab's still probably something like $200,000 versus $900 here of AST Space Mobile. But I do have some exposure to it and would be open to adding a little bit more. Below 20 probably is kind of the target I set. I haven't researched this as thoroughly as Rocket Lab, of course, kind of basing this on, my initial research of the company, and also just a lot of smart people I respect a lot being very bullish on it. So I'm willing to take a little bit of a flyer on this one despite the lack of revenue right now. I also was buying some HIMs lately. I do like this stock anywhere below 35 and certainly below 30. So I added some, about 33 here, as well as 28. That was just recently, and I gave up on my Lunar. I told you guys about that previously, I think, in another video, but if you missed it, kind of lost a little bit of confidence in that company after their second failed lunar landing. Said I'd throw in the towel on that one and rather focus more on companies I know better and have more conviction in. So I did sell out of my lunar shares. It wasn't a massive position, something like $1,500 or about $2,000 at the end of the day. Probably put in a little bit more into that and did have some losses. Yeah, lost about $500 on it or something like that. But unfortunate, that's what happens when you crash your lunar lander. And Redwire, I did talk about Redwire a little bit in a couple previous videos. I find this company interesting, especially when you get to prices, sub $8 per share, anywhere around there. So I did start nibbling at around 11 and then added some more around $8. Not a ton once again, but I did buy about 5,500 worth of it. What I'm thinking kind of right now is obviously Rocket Lab, the big space stock position, but I'd be open to adding maybe 10,000 bucks of Redwire, 10,000 bucks of AST, 10,000 plus of HIMS, because I do like that company, and maybe a few others. But yeah, Rocket Lab's still the biggest in terms of this growth companies I own, as well as Tesla at number 2, which has also taken a beating. Just to show my Rocket Lab position, because I know a lot of my people out there watching are following because of Rocket Lab, I do still have 14,500 shares. I did sell about $500 for the house purchase at about $28 per share, so timing turned out pretty good there. Of course, I didn't get it right at 32, but I think $28 for that sale was a good price. Was painful to sell the stock, but these are the reasons we invest: to buy new homes, to build our life and our family and all that kind of stuff. So certainly not the worst reason to sell the company, and hopefully I will have the opportunity to add more shares and get it back up to 15,000 plus. I really did want to buy at a sub $15 level. If we hit that again, the cash problem is the concern. Where do I find the money right now? Yeah, I'm sure you guys have all experienced that as well. But we may get a chance to add sub 15. And keep in mind, that is still over a 3x from where I initially bought. My cost basis sitting all the way down at 411 right now. I love this cost basis. Absolutely amazing. Don't love increasing it, but I would do it for Rocket Lab. Definitely at a $15 price. And maybe even higher than that. So I'll be keeping an eye on this one. Also kind of thinking about maybe selling some puts long term. If you're not familiar, that is a bullish options move. It would be like a long-term expiry type thing, but feeling very confident in the execution of that company right now, despite all the short-term tariff concerns of the overall markets crashing. So talking about the overall markets and what I'm thinking lately, obviously I don't have a lot of money, so I'm just kind of riding out the storm. The one good thing I would say is I didn't have any margin exposure at all going into this downturn, going into this crash. So if you did, I'm sure you know the pain I'm talking about, because I've been through that before in previous downturns. That's why I had no exposure lately. That being said, if the VIX continues to spike, that is the volatility index and tracking kind of fear in the overall market. You can think of it a little bit that way. And we're already at quite a high compared to pretty much only a few other times has it been as high as this. We had COVID, of course, and then the 2008 crash for the financial crisis. But really, this is one of the few times it's been that high. So I did, in the COVID crash, at the height of the VIX hitting 70-ish. Now, don't attack me here, but I did use a little bit of leverage, and I don't advise investors to do this, especially beginner investors who are not familiar with leverage, because you can really screw yourself over in a huge way. And I like to use leverage in as safe as possible of a way. So when I use leverage, I like to buy something that pays a dividend which is more than the interest rate I am paying, and something that I think is very safe. So back in 2021, when the stocks were crashing, the VIX was high, I was able to buy bank stocks for significantly, very cheap on a historical basis in terms of their price to earnings ratios, but also their dividend payout was significantly higher than I would have to pay on interest for that leverage. So I was very careful in how I did it and make sure I didn't over leverage myself and very small compared to my overall net worth went into that. But that worked out beautifully at the time, and I had big returns on the bounce back and recovery, as well as getting paid every month that went by to own those stocks because they were more than covering the interest fees. So if we continue to have massive crashes, and I know this time is different because with the tariffs, like anything can happen, we can really have a trade war that spirals out of control. But that could also end with a tweet from the president. So, you know what? I think it's not as bad as a global pandemic. So if we get to those levels, I might very responsively, very carefully, with a very relatively low amount, put a toe in leverage. But again, I don't like to do it, and only during crashes when the VIX really spikes, only with safe stocks that pay me more than I'm paying in interest, so I can hold on to those indefinitely and with low levels of leverage. So there's different ways of doing that, and I'm not going to go into that with too much detail, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Would be interested to hear your thoughts. Would this crash ever get to the point where you start using leverage? What kind of companies would you buy with it? And have you ever been margin called before? Would be interested to hear that as well. Zooming out once again, if we look out a little bit further on a 5-year basis, yes, this drop has been extremely sharp and extremely painful. We're still above those highs of 2022, so I guess it's not the end of the world. And as long as you weren't over leveraged, I think you will be fine. If I had to guess what will happen, I mean, of course, I'm not a mind reader, and it's really down to the president. This entire market crash is down to the president. It's crazy to say. I think one day, he likes being popular. He likes everyone calling him smart. He can basically get any kind of trade deals and say, I won, and save face and basically declare victory and kind of end the tariff wars. And I think he'll probably do that at some point because, again, he likes being popular. He likes everyone telling him how great he is. So at some point when things are really bad and he'll extract some trade deals from a few other countries, he'll basically just declare victory and say, look how great I am. And then we'll all be looking at the ruins of our portfolios, but at least the trade wars will be over. That's kind of what I think will happen, but, it remains to be seen if he does hold to these so-called reciprocal tariffs throughout his entire term. That it would really be a disaster scenario for our portfolios. So in a scenario like that, you definitely don't want to be over leveraged, not even close. And that is something to keep in mind for sure. So those are my investing updates from the past month or so. It's been rough, but we'll get through this together. Let me know what trades or moves you've been making. Have you been adding Rocket Lab, AST, Redwire, or any of the other companies out there? I'm always interested to hear. Let me know how close you think we are to the bottom, when this is going to end, how this is going to end. Let's continue the conversation. Thank you guys so much for watching. And by the way, sorry that the video schedule has been a bit light lately. I've been packing and getting ready for the move, so the background is probably looking a little sparse back there, and things are going to be busy over the next month or so as I move. There's a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, so hope you'll bear with me with that. But I do have some important videos coming up as well, like, for example, my Rocket Lab valuation update that I've been working on. That should be coming very shortly, so look out for that one. I hope you guys do have a great day and a great rest of the week, and you're handling this market volatility okay. I know it can be rough. Trade safe out there. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.